And welcome back to another episode of In a Perfect World. I am your host, Rak Razam, and we've got a very special episode here for you today. It's with my co-conspirator, Niles Heckman, who was, I first interviewed back in podcast number 88, which was called Psychedelic Design in Hollywood. Niles has been working on post-production and special effects on lots of different Hollywood films. And we met up over the years through our podcasts, and we have become creative collaborators and have just formed an LLC in America called UMIMU, or UMIIMU, which is the production company which is making Shamans of the Global Village, which is our new online TV show all about shamanism and the resurgence of interest in this modality and why it's important in the 21st century, why the usage of earth medicines, including plant medicines, in episode 1, which features the Bufo alvarius toad, why these things can be important to come back into the cultural mainframe and how they can bring us back into right relationship with ourselves, our environment and the planet, and our place in the web of life. And you know, I started off doing this work 10 years ago with Ira Awakenings, or what became Ira Awakenings, my virgin trip down to the Amazon, working with ayahuasca, and this was still the single predominant question I was interested in even back then, is what is the role of the shaman in the 21st century and why is it important? And as I have fallen deeper down the rabbit hole with each preceding year, on my own shamanic path, I am realizing what that means to me, and I think to us as a community, as a global community. And so a lot of the issues and a lot of the conversation here in the global village, in this idea of us as a global village, in this interconnected community with indigenous cultures that used to have their medicine person, and I'm seeing this return in the last 10 years in my work with ayahuasca and my outreach through making media like this, In a Perfect World. Many of the people I've interviewed over the years who have their own shamanic leanings or their own being in service to their communities, and they might not be what you would consider a traditional shaman to be. You know, the traditional definition essentially is, can the person heal? Can what they do with the medicines they work with, is it of benefit to the tribe, and can it help heal the tribe? And I think in this modern day and age, it's not just the usual physical illnesses, like a lot of the curanderos, the Amazons, the shamans of the Amazon I talked to originally a decade ago now, they said to me a lot of Westerners were coming not with just physical illnesses, but with a spiritual malaise or a spiritual sickness of the soul, which was this disconnection from the web of life and understanding their place in it. And so, you know, for quite a while now with my book, Ira Awakenings, and the film, and now the work I'm doing with Shamans of the Global Village, and this podcast and things like this, it's still the same. I believe that my words and my media and my output are part of my medicine for the global tribe, and that there are different ways that we can heal and help each other to reconnect. So please check out our new show I've been doing with director Niles Heckman, shamansoftheglobalvillage.com. It is available for stream and for download, and we do rely upon your support. This is a 100% independently made media, and in today's day and age, there is so much information and other things out there that we do need community support to help people know about it and to support the show by buying it, by downloading it, and letting other people know about it. We do hope that this will be an ongoing episodic TV show online, that we can focus on other practitioners. We're hoping to go to Africa next year in June or so and work with a practitioner who has experience and has a connection to the lineage of Iboga. We have future episodes planned that look at the psilocybin mushroom, look at San Pedro cactus, Hayoma, Salvia divinorum, all the major plant entheogens across the planet, and the practitioners, the global shamans that work with them and connect to their local communities in the global village. So it's a really exciting concept show. I hope you can check it out, and I hope you can support it. And thanks again for listening to In a Perfect World. Aloha.
What is shamanism, Rak? And specifically, what is shamanism in the 21st century, my good man?
Okay, so shamanism is something which has been around for millennia. It's basically not just the world's oldest religion, it's the most direct form of spirituality and of engaging with the intelligence and the spirit of the earth itself in all its forms. There's been practitioners of shamanism, and of course, this word shaman is a Western conceit. It's a construct by Western anthropologists. It comes from the Siberian tradition of their shaman, of their medicine person. But there are medicine people all around the world in many different cultures. They work with psychoactive or mind-altering plants, with trance, with dance, with different ways of spirit, with the drum, with breath work, with ways to get out of the body and to engage on a spiritual level, in a spiritual ecology, almost like the astral level, where in an animist tradition, the world is full of intelligences and entities and spirits, and that those energies affect us. And the medicine person traditionally works on behalf of the health of the tribe and keeping people not just healthy individually, but mediated in the Gaian, in the planetary ecology, to be in balance and to be in right relationship with all the species, so energy can flow through and everything is in accord. And that's what I believe the role of the medicine person is, and that's what the role of the shaman has been in many different cultures across the world. And this is what has been lacking in the West, as we have dominated and conquered and raped and pillaged the planet and taken and thrown the world out of balance, like in the movie Conisquatsi, like out of balance. And that this is why it is so vital and so important that the role of the medicine person or the shaman come back to the West and come back to leading us into right relationship and to unity consciousness and into an ecological and spiritual awareness of the earth as a whole organism that we are part of and in relationship with.
Right, and it's not even just the West. It's pretty much the entire industrialized first world, even in large cities in the East, for example, because the problem with modernity in terms of infrastructure or imperial society is that it's kind of completely philosophically and spiritually bankrupt. And wisdom traditions in ancient cultures, such as indigenous people, shamanic people, people of the land, know more about who they are as a multidimensional human being than people that are purely in material 5 sense reality that people are in the industrialized first world. So we have this, we're severed from our spiritual nature of divinity and cosmos. So that's a key component to shamanism.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because when I say the West, I almost mean like the West has spent a few generations now to impose globalization on the world and Western values. And so West has actually, like a virus, started to encapsulate the old world and Europe and Asia and everywhere. So this is it. It is, as they say, as our show likes to quote Marshall McLuhan, it is a global village. We are a global village, and it has been imposed politically from the top down. But we are also, a spiritual global village, which comes from the bottom up, from this interconnected root system. And as above, so below, and as this need for a spiritual rebalancing is happening, at the same time that the global political networks and tribal networks of nation states are sort of disintegrating, there's this reclamation and this resurgence of spiritual anchoring that's happening all across the world, and it is a global village, and we do need these shamans of the global village.
Right, and you just mentioned as above, so below, which is a key component to understanding who and what you are as a human being, and a major component of that is your own personal, individual, sovereign path as a direct experience path, and the issue that a lot of industrialized first world religious or spiritual systems have is that they've severed from the direct path. So shamanism is a very singular direct path because it's all about your own direct experience, and that is just so crucial.
Yes.
What are the various modalities of shamanism, and in terms of actual, you mentioned medicines. Why do you call these things medicines, and what are the kind of different ways that shamans work?
So this is it. Indigenous cultures around the world have understood that the earth secretes these many substances, and food is a medicine, and these psychoactive plants are a medicine because they connect us to a deeper understanding of what reality really is. It's only in from the 20th century or 19th century even on, really, that we've started to commodify and have an understanding of drugs. And this comes from a pharmaceutical sort of more assembly line sort of paradigm, which is separate from the natural environment. So, if you plant something, or if something is growing naturally and it has a relationship with the earth or a relationship with you as you pick or harvest or interact with it, there's a sustainability and a balance in that relationship. in modern times, we've again, it comes back to this idea of dominated culture, or what is the Western culture, and it's this value system which has been inherited in the last 1,000 years or so. The West comes from this idea of Constantinople and the church as it moved west and into Europe, but this idea that drugs are something which are produced separate from a relationship with them, and the earth has a relationship with the medicine plants. There are many different aspects of shamanism and pathways to the divine, whether you use trance or dance or tantra or there's many different organic pathways that can be developed. Many different tribes around the world have used psychoactive medicines. Now, when shamanism was first being coined in the West in the 40s and 50s, Mircea Eliade, who is the famous anthropologist who wrote the book on shamanism, in his anthropological research, he discounted all the psychoactive plant medicines because he had a cultural prejudice. His generation of anthropologists had a cultural prejudice he inherited from the Western dominated culture, Catholic tradition, which went into these cultures for hundreds of years, like into South America, and colonized and saved the savages from their version of spirituality of, they saw the San Pedro cactus as the work of the devil, the magic mushroom was the work of the devil. They tried to disconnect and kill off these substances which had such a pronounced effect on the psyche and the soul and the mind, which these Western colonial powers were terrified of. It was outside the bounds of their spirituality. But the legacy of that has been in the 50s with anthropology is that they did not see the forest for the trees, and so they discounted a lot of these power plants and these psychoactives, and they only concentrated on trance and dance and the drumming and things like that, which are all very valid, but they were components of a larger spiritual pathway, which included a direct gnosis from the planet. The magic mushrooms in the Mesoamerican description, and I can't pronounce it properly, but it's something like Tiyakol. There's a word for it, but it means the flesh of the gods. And all of the entheogens, in a sense, this comes from the Latin term, the entheogen, to invoke the divine within. This is what they do. They reveal within us, when we consume them in relationship with them, that we are part of a larger ecology, that the individual I and the ego, which is out of control and has created or been a participant in this dominated culture which has been attacking the earth, the individual ego is released and subsumed into the Gaian or planetary ego or intelligence, and we come back home. And so this has been a real threat to many power structures, but the role of medicine people and shamans has been of gatekeepers of these sacred substances. What Terence McKenna actually believed were exopheromones or substances which were secreted by the planet to be species mediators, to actually control the evolution or the awareness of species like humans on the earth, and to bring them back into the fold. So it's a complicated and a large conversation around these different pathways that different shamans use, but all around the world, psychoactive plants and sometimes animals have been used for millennia and are some of the most powerful pathways and the most sacred pathways to connect to this planetary intelligence.
Great. That leads me into the next question, which is kind of already segued here, which is why is this all so important? And I'll kind of preemptively give my blurb on that, which is that, as you say, dude, the element of kind of the Western world or the industrialized first world is very stigmatized in terms of the word drug. And it seems funny because in backward society of that culture, so many things that are contractive are very legal in terms of drugs, and anything that's pretty much expansive in terms of human consciousness is illegal. So a lot of these plants, which are to be used as medicines, are in fact psychedelic drugs per se, in terms of the way that you label things in the industrialized first world. But what they really are is medicines, because in order to kind of use a metaphor from John Carpenter's film They Live, they're able to wake you from your artificially induced state of consciousness, which resembles sleep. And that requires a lot of development in terms of the individual, but these medicines have a huge capability to kind of stair-step you and move you forward in terms of your consciousness, which the species as a whole, with all of our societal problems and our ecological problems is desperately in need of, because we can't solve any of our old problems with kind of the same level of consciousness that we were at before.
That's true. And okay, for me, I'll take you back. 10 years ago, I went down to the Amazon and I had one of my first ayahuasca experiences in the jungle, the lungs of the earth in the Amazon. And one of the most beautiful things that happened to me was not any personal healing, but it was this reconnection, right, to the planet and to the jungle and to the web of life. And I could hear the animals and the monkeys and the birds and feel the wind in the trees. And I wasn't just using my five senses. Something opened within me, and I was what I heard. There was no separation between me and the earth, and I became one with it. And when we come back into this awareness of our relationship with the earth, that it's not separate, that it's like saying, I'm just one finger on a hand, and there's a whole body, and we're all connected, and we're all one organism. That awareness is what we used to have on the earth, what many indigenous cultures that live sustainably used as their compass to navigate how they worked on the earth, how they lived on the earth, how they loved on the earth. That's what we have lost in modern culture around the world, and what is needed, because we are in an ecological catastrophe. We're in a crisis point. We are in the sixth great species extinction across the world at the moment, which we are largely as humans responsible for. I do believe that there are larger seasons of consciousness, and the reason that we have fallen out of this unity state, like the fall of consciousness, is because we've basically gone down to one bar signal, of this awareness, this signal of our relationship and our place in the universe, and that in the seasons of consciousness, it's coming full cycle, and now we're seeing an incredible global shamanic resurgence of working with the plants to heal individuals and to reconnect them to the web of life and to their awareness of who they really are and what our relationship is. And this reclamation of our consciousness, which is being mediated by medicine people and shamans, is not just for the shamans, it's for everyone. It's for everyone to have this capacity and to remember this capacity within themselves to be plugged into the mother, Gaia and Mother Earth. And that essentially is the emergence, which is the opportunity of the emergency. The planetary crisis we are undergoing is, many commentators have said, the opportunity for a species evolution, and it happens regularly over large tracts of time. And I believe that this is the cresting of a wave, and that we are living through these transformational times. And this whole keyword of awakening, what does that really mean? It means we remember who and what we really are, embedded in the web of life, and the love of being in that connection and of having relationship and vision and right steps forward, is that we can basically, I'm going to use the word, be galactic citizens, right? It's woo-woo, it's out there, but in the sense of we are alive, the planet is alive, the stars are alive. I mean, the entire universe is full of life and love, and there's light and dark in there. We can't be naive, but we're coming to a greater level of awareness, which many indigenous cultures have had of their place in the cosmos, and we're coming full circle. We're coming home.
Right, and indigenous cultures, because of to add to why this is so important, indigenous cultures, because of their relationship with the plants and because of the biosphere and their shamanistic practices, were much less materialistic. And thereby, in the industrialized first world that severed their relationship to this practice is completely off balance in terms of their materialism, thus creating all these ecological destructions. So that's a huge component of that as well. But beautiful, well said, man, well said. How did you come to initially conceptualize this show, my good man? Even kind of the initial name that you were the one that named this show. So why don't you say how you conceptualized it and how the name came about?
Well, I've been working with plant medicines, predominantly ayahuasca, for 10 years now, since 2006. And basically, just one step at a time, I answered the call of the shamanic path. And I went down to the Amazon in 2006 as a freelance journalist, reporting on not just ayahuasca, but what was the role of the shaman in the 21st century, and why was this important? And 3 months later, and 30 chapters, and an entire awakening of my own divinity and my place in the world, I got the message of ayahuasca. And as part of that, in the last 10 years, I wrote the book Aya Awakenings, and then that became the film Aya Awakenings, the documentary film. And as part of all of that, in my outreach to other medicine people around the world and communities, I was seeing these interesting dynamics and vectors and growth sort of spurts where people would go down to Peru and a certain statistical number of them would stay on the medicine path, and a certain number of those people would become anchor points or neo shamans to work with the medicine, and not because they wanted to, but because the medicine of the spirit in the plants told them to. It's like, you have a capacity, you have a gift, and we need your help. The planet needs your help to step into this role and hold space for this energy which is coming through. And I was having these conversations a lot, just organically, with people around the world in their different medicine communities and Westerners essentially. And I could see that there was a bridge developing from the plant kingdom to indigenous cultures, and from indigenous cultures which had the lineage to connect to certain Westerners who would then take this energy and blossom it back in their communities in the West. And, I had this idea that there was a global shamanic resurgence happening. And so that evolution of my relationships with medicine communities around the world, both indigenous and Western, flourished over many years. And I was holding space for this term, the shamans of the global village. And it's really only been, funnily enough, in the last year or two when the full completion has happened of The Eye of the Book and The Eye Awakenings, the film, and touring that around the world and meeting all of these people. And almost with the last breath of that energy, of that cycle, of that project, came the realization that it was time to do this next step. And again, just following the path one step at a time, and opportunities arose to work with a Mexican shaman who was working with the Bufo Alvarius toad medicine. And from that, we evolved into the idea of episode 1 of Shamans of the Global Village.
So in terms of the actual title, I mean, the global village is a term that Marshall McLuhan coined, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Marshall McLuhan was a media commentator and analyst. This is a really interesting thing because since the 60s, I have to step back and give you a bit more historical context. The Western tradition of altered states, essentially in the 20th century, was the psychedelic movement. And that was birthed by Albert Hofmann in 1943, who was himself not just a chemist, but in the mystic traditions of Switzerland. And the ergo derivatives that LSD was derived from are only one molecule different from LSA, the morning glory seeds used by indigenous cultures. And it was almost as if the psychic buildup in the whole system of the earth for so many centuries, having this industrialization, mechanization, and raping and pillaging of the earth, and this disconnect from spirituality, it created this pressure cooker that had to come out somewhere. And so this equilibrium was reset through Albert Hofmann in the laboratory to mass produce a substance which got out there. And from the many different faceted things that the psychedelic revolution did, it was centered around Palo Alto, which became Silicon Valley, and the computer revolution. And these things were paralleling as streams. I'm not saying that LSD created the internet or the computer revolution, but all through the late 50s and early 60s, before it was banned, all of the intelligentsia, or many of the intelligentsia, and many of the corporate leaders, and many of people in these positions working with things like cybernetics and computers, they were using this substance as a psychedelic lubricant, a psychic lubricant, to stretch what was essentially a post-World War II consciousness, which had to become multidimensional. It had to become non-linear. Nowadays, we log on in the mornings, we go on social media, we're connected to up to 5,000 friends at once in a feed. We've got a cloud computing upload where data's transferred up and down. We understand the language of terminology, and essentially all of that is a fragmentation of linear consciousness, which had to be eased in somehow. And I believe that LSD, succeeded in helping stretch the boundaries of consciousness of basically white picket fence America to prepare us for the deeper connection of entheogenic consciousness and shamanic consciousness, which is now coming through the plants. There's been a gradation, there's been a stepping stone happening here. We weren't ready for the plants and for the shamans back in the 1950s or 60s. We had to go through this initiation. And now we've seen this global shamanic resurgence and this stepping up and this evolution. So the global village itself, is a term that Marshall McLuhan coined, is incredibly apt, because we are an interlocking network of small localized communities in a village sense. We are nodes within a network. And the network is what we are all about. The interconnectedness of everyone is essentially what the psychedelic or entheogenic experience can reveal, the unity of all things. That other cultures in the world, like the Hindus, might have called this Indra's net, or Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere. There's been these concepts before, but the global village is what we are essentially on the physical level, but a village is essentially bound together by an experience. In indigenous cultures, they are born onto the land. Their commonality is they live and die on that land together in unity, and they rely on each other, and they rely on the earth and the land that they are in partnership with. And so if we truly are a global village, as Marshall McLuhan said, we have to come back to the earth, and we have to come back to our spirit, and we have to be a spiritual global village that embodies what it really means to be custodians of the land and to be these gatekeepers for these higher dimensional realms, which are part of the earth. And so to me, a shamanic global village is what we are really becoming.
Right, and those higher realms are a key component to understanding what reality really is, because nothing does just come from this material reality. So a shaman understands that there's more to reality in terms of the earth than just what you see is what you get. So it's like you're seeing a window into more truth by having that kind of relationship. And in terms of that global village, it's like, as we hint in this first episode, I mean, we used to be a global shamanic culture. So the show highlighting the resurgence of this in the West, it's not like this is a new thing. This is something that at one point was global, and now it's just coming back to this kind of former imperial kind of first world that has severed its connection with shamanism. As those nodes on the network that you described switch on, people become interested in these things because of the truth and the power in them and reconnect to that lineage of them.
Let me tell you, I've been in contact with some people here in Australia that have been initiated into Aboriginal communities, and there is public knowledge and private knowledge, and there's men's business and women's business. But the gist of some of these very important questions which are being relayed to me is that Australian Aboriginal custodians of the land, which is some of the oldest existing tribes and communities which have unbroken lineages on the earth, 80,000 or more years, they understand large tracts of time. They understand cycles of time and world ages, like many other cultures have said, the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age, the World Age, the Golden Age, the wheel of time as it turns. And what has been relayed to me is that the dream time is coming back. And the dream time is a frequency or a state of consciousness, probably akin to unity state, where this entheogenic or psychedelic experience of, they've done tests very recently in the last decade or so and ongoingly with all the different entheogens or psychedelics, with LSD, with psilocybin mushrooms, with ayahuasca, and essentially they've proven on the scientific level what these substances do is they switch off different areas of the brain called the default mode network. And when those areas are switched off, the ego, or this identity construct that we think we really are, is relaxed, and this permeability of what consciousness comes through starts to switch on. And they've done tests even back in the 60s, documented and proven that LSD is metabolized by the body within 19 minutes, and the actual psychic effect starts to come on about half an hour in. So it is not these substances which are having this effect on our bodies or our consciousness. These things are just like valves or switches which are switching off different regions of the brain to reveal within ourselves the capacity for these states of mind, for this potentially dreamtime consciousness. So what I see happening now is a journey that we are all going on as members of this global village. And this journey is to, in one sense, invoke the Buddha nature within, or the Christ consciousness within, or the dreamtime consciousness within. And certain aspects of the community of our villages, the shamans or the medicine people they're like captains on the ship steering this wheel, but the ship is what it's all about. The collective is what it's all about. And we are all awakening according to the impeccability of divine timing, of when we need to awaken and what our capacity to awaken is, because you cannot wake someone from a dream. They say you've got to let them wake up of their own timing of their relationship with the energy coming in. But when enough of this critical mass does awaken and does claim their relationship both with divinity and the earth and the shamanic sort of realms, I think it's a global shamanic culture, that it's a shift in consciousness that we have gone through as a species before, and it is coming full circle around again, and it's a reclamation of a unity state of knowing our relationship with the earth, and on an energetic astral level, our relationship with the animals we might hunt or not hunt or preserve. And it's an expanded consciousness that we're being asked to step into, and we've been there before as a species, and it's time for us to go in it again. So this is a transitional step of these shamans of the global village, because eventually, essentially, everyone is their own shaman, everyone is their own healer, everyone is their own medicine, everyone is an extension of Great Spirit walking the earth, and that's where it's going to go.
In terms of the resurgence of this in, let's say, the quote unquote industrialized first world, or parts of the industrialized first world, that this practice is being rediscovered and reapplied to and reworked with, like the 60s revolution, for example, with something like LSD, where people are just taking an entheogen without a shaman. Can you talk about the difference between, what it is to take an entheogen just by itself versus taking one with a shaman? It's a
Yeah, so
rediscovery.
some of the many important points about this shamanic resurgence is it's not just about the medicine itself. It's about the context and the container and the lineage and the protection and the integrity of how you approach these things. So in indigenous cultures that had shamanic works that were done, there were times to shamanize, and that the shaman would do it. In some cultures, like the Shipibo in Peru, they would often take the medicine on behalf of their patients, so the patients would not drink the ayahuasca. In other Mesoamerican and South American tribes, the entire tribe will drink or partake of their particular medicine and journey together for the group healing. And some of the many things I've learned over the years through ayahuasca and my relationship with that is that it's not just about the medicine and drinking it on its own. It's, are you in a protected space? Are you in a ceremonial space? Is the container you were doing the work in safe and protected? Do you know how to protect yourself? Because what you're opening up yourself up to, not just with ayahuasca or all the entheogens, but all of the psychedelics essentially, is that you're sort of peeling back the, I guess, like an astral condom, in the sense of your protection from all these entities. If you go swimming in a lake which is filled with, microorganisms, and you might get sick, if you go onto the astral, as above, so below, there are organisms, energetic organisms, which exist according to indigenous shamanic cultures on these scales of being, and that we're just thrusting ourselves into, alien territory, and we don't know what's happening. So in the West, there's been this idea that people can just take these substances like they were going to take a tab of acid or a drug. And it's not like that. You can, but there are consequences. And the recommendation from medicine people and elders is that these things are sacred, and that they must be done in the right way and with the right relationship. And because of that sacredness, it's really important to have lineage or connection to someone that can teach us the correct ways to do this. Because we're opening ourselves up to a vast ecology of energetic entities which may stay with you after the ceremony. And there's been many documented cases in the Western ayahuasca tradition of passengers or things that come in that need to be cleansed and gotten rid of later. But also we're going into their space and we're invading their space. It's sort of like some astral imperialism. It's like, here come the humans. And, you may have the keys to a car. It doesn't mean you know how to drive. It doesn't mean that you know where is the safe places to drive. It doesn't mean you know what all the dashboard means. This is an incredibly ancient art, shamanism. It's what most of the people who hold the responsibility of being a shaman train for decades to master, to be protected and to be integral in doing the work. And some Westerners are just being infinitile about it. I mean, there's a quest for exploration. There's a quest for an excitement to be part of this expanded consciousness and awareness, and that's understandable. But do it the right way. Do it protected. Do it with integrity. Do it with help. Outreach to other people, other communities, and other people that work with indigenous lineages. Because if you're really feeling this call to work with these substances, join the family, join the tribe, become part of this movement that is happening, and you will get more out of it that way, and it'll be safer and more held and contained.
Yeah, and an indigenous culture had kept the lineage of that shamanistic practice, which was done over a long period of time and practiced over a long period of time and kind of more or less, I don't want to say perfected over a long period of time, but understood. And so people in taking LSD in the 60s in a culture that's new to rediscovering this sacrament hasn't had the actual time lineage to discover its shamanistic capabilities or practices yet. But should that sacrament continue to be used in that culture, they would, in fact, surely end up shamanizing with it and getting more out of it. How did you come to actually, from the conceptualization of the show, how did you actually come to get the initial beginnings of the first episode going?
So episode 1 of Shamans of the Global Village is called, it's focusing not just on the medicine, but on the practitioners. So what Niles and I have been really interested in doing is documenting the role of the shaman in the 21st century, people that work with psychoactive materials, sacred medicines, which connect them to the earth and connect them to these shamanic realms. And I had been initiated by Dr. Octavio Rettig, who is a Mexican doctor who is authorized to work with the medicine of the Sonoran desert toad, the Bufo alvarius or Bufo incilius toad, which contains in its parotoid glands, when squeezed and dried and smoked, the incredibly potent medicine of 5-MeO-DMT. Now, anyone who has actually looked at my book, Ire Awakenings, or seen the film, especially of Ire Awakenings, there's a scene in that where I use 5-MeO-DMT as well. And it's been described to me that all the entheogens and sacred medicines are like baubles on a Christmas tree or maybe the tree of life, and that the star or the light at the top is 5-MeO-DMT. It is, as far as I know, the most potent psychedelic or entheogenic substance available in nature, and it occurs endogenously in our own brains. And the tryptamines are very interesting. It's like they work on the serotonin pathways. They're almost a neurotransmitter, and they're all throughout nature. And it seems to be the backdoor access that nature has put into us to connect us to the divine realms. So Dr. Octavio Rettig visited Australia and initiated myself and many other members of my community last April 2015, and everything changed. Like I have had 5-MeO experiences only once before, because it was such an incredibly powerful direct connection with the source. Like the Sufis would say, the drop rejoins the ocean, is that it totally melts the ego, and it really can't be encapsulated in words, even though I do give it a good shot, in the sense that it's just so all-encompassing and holy and sacred and loving and immense that, my path changed at that moment, essentially, and it's taken a bit of integration to move forward, but I've become enmeshed in working with many NGOs and practitioners legally around the world. I formed the Terra Incognita project, which is a 501c3 organization in the States, to work with this medicine and to explore the science behind this medicine of what we call neuroshamanism. And I've kept in contact with Dr. Rettig, and in a very short amount of time, again, things just came together very like they were ordained or orchestrated. Between April being initiated and July when we went down to shoot, it was boom, boom, boom. And we formed a team, and we raised the resources to shoot this episode, to really examine what Dr. Octavio Rettig was doing in Mexico with the Sonoran desert toad and with the medicine of 5-MeO-DMT, and sharing that with the world and the global village. So it's an incredibly powerful episode. And I think energetically what I've realized is that, I actually thought it was something to work up towards 5-MeO-DMT in a shamanic sense. But the more I work with it, the more I realize that it is the strongest. It's the one at the top, and then it's working our way down. So I think that I feel really shamanically or energetically guided that this has been our responsibility and our privilege to work with Octavio and with the Sonoran Desert Toad, and to document his work with 5-MeO-DMT, and to share this with the world, to really say that, the dawn of the toad is upon us, and it's such a profound experience that it needs to be understood, and that we are now going to be working with future episodes with different other shamans and different other entheogens to document the diversity of these substances and the sacred approach to them in the world.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, why not start a pilot episode with kind of the strongest of all the medicines, if or at least that we know for the time being, just make it a very powerful pilot, which it certainly is. All right, so let's do the call to action for the community to support us and the dynamics around that.
Yeah, so Shamans of the Global Village is an online documentary TV show. It's episodic in the sense that the vision for it is that we want to do either 1 or 2 seasons of this work, and I've looked around it in my 10 years of working with different entheogenic medicines and different practitioners around the world. We see many different substances that are secreted by the planet and are potentially exopheromones in the sense of they're substances the earth secretes that are designed to interact with our consciousnesses, to mediate us and to bring us back into relationship. And different bioregions around the world all produce different psychedelic or entheogenic substances. There's many, but some of the most pronounced, there's almost like a dozen. There's like a sort of prime ones. There's the ayahuasca, there's San Pedro, there's the Sonoran Desert Toad with 5-MeO, there's acacias in Australia and elsewhere, there's psilocybin mushrooms, there's iboga, there's salvia divinorum, there's tobacco, there's marijuana, there's many different things that the West has encountered from indigenous cultures. So our aim is to not just document these substances, but to document people that are working with them and to see the patterns within that, to see how the role of the shaman in the 21st century in the West or in modern culture is connected to indigenous cultures and from indigenous cultures to the plants and the planet themselves, and to see this unbroken thread that is resurging now. And so as part of that, I know that there is a global shamanic community of not just practitioners, but of people that have felt the power of these medicines, that have felt the sacredness of these substances and these states of mind. And we are global and we are growing. And it is part of this awakening process. And so what I really feel is that Shamans of the Global Village is your show. It's like we are making sacred media and we're taking a lot of steps to hold the integrity of the message and to document authentically and transparently what is going on, warts and all. We want to talk about the shadows as much as the light, the teething issues, the commodification, the commercialization, the joy, the sacredness, the reconnection. And so this is your show. If you are part of the shamanic movement, if you are part of the ayahuasca movement or the toad movement or the mushroom movement, it's all a larger movement. And this is a larger awakening of our species. And so I get pretty big picture with this. But we are holding space for you. And we ask you to join us to support the show, because we are doing this on our own. We're doing this without the support of a larger network or any other vested financial interests. And so by downloading the show, by streaming, by watching the show and supporting it with your financial support, you can ensure that the next episode will get made. And it's a bit of a Herculean journey on to do 12 entheogens, 12 shamanic practitioners all across the world, in Africa, in Gabon, in Peru, in the Amazon, in Iran with the Hayoma, like all around the world, these substances exist and they are switching us on. And the gatekeepers, the medicine people, are the ones who are bringing this to the community. And so please, if you are part of this community, this is your show. We are just holding space and creating a container for documenting the work in a way which mainstream media cannot because of its vested interests. So we rely on your support. We are going to be, as episode 1 is released, we start moving towards episode 2. We will be doing some crowdfundings. We will have opportunities for people to engage with the show and potentially even come with us on some of these journeys, and to be an extension of the community and to be supported by the community is our vision and our great hope. Thank you.
Right, and it really is, just in terms of the kind of you and I being the creators of the show, one thing that's so special about this show for us is it really is kind of synchronistically just the perfect combination of our skill sets, and also the perfect merging of our life's work thus far in terms of your background, as being very intertwined with the kind of community globally, and your past documentary experience and past, production capabilities and being the kind of person that you are in terms of producing projects. And then my kind of, it's like you're such a perfect one side of the coin. And then what you needed to get this show going and to do it the best it can be. It's like I provide the other perfect side of the other coin.
I know.
Yeah,
How
so it's
beautiful
like
is that?
in
Because
terms,
together we are stronger.
yeah, in terms of like, looping in somebody who's also passionate about the medicines and has been, on his own path of spiritual growth and has had some of these direct experiences and seen the power in them and has been desperately searching to create content that's more conscious content, and then looping in that person who has a background working on incredibly top of the line projects with, very high production values, bringing them to this show as like somebody that's, very capable of being a multifaceted, multi-capable director and kind of cinematographer and just filmmaker on the back end, even in terms of like editing and these things that you and I kind of co-shared these multiple roles on this project. Because yes, as something that's made independently, we each have to wear multiple hats. So for each you and I wearing a few hats, it's like we're wearing the few hats that we're really phenomenally, amazingly good at. And so it's like the pipeline is built to do something that is the content is there, and your depth and substance and background and capabilities and even interview skill set and language skill set as the host of the show is perfectly compromised to my, visual production values and direction capabilities and slick design in terms of the presentation of the material. So that's the unique thing.
If anyone is hearing this or reading this, please embed the trailer link, because prepare to be blown away. We are both, Niles Heckman is the director, has done this amazing job, like incredible job to capture the sacredness and the beauty of these experiences and these locales and these people. And, totally hats off to you. I feel that we are both in deepest service to the medicines and to, the spirit that's coming through the medicines. And this, this is revolutionary stuff. It's paradigm crushing, as you like to say. And you know what I wanted to say? My last thing I wanted to say is that they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a tribe or a village to support this show. It really does. I mean, it takes. We're all doing this so incredibly well on whatever budget the community can support by supporting the show and buying the show. And I know that we will be reciprocated in supporting that, but it takes a village to make this TV show. So please, become part of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And like it being the culmination of our skill sets, it's the perfect vehicle to kind of help share this information in a way that through being done independently is very effective, because now is the perfect time to also make this show, because the show couldn't have been made in the way that it's being made just a few years ago. So it's like the perfect content at the perfect time. And I think there's no randomness behind that. I think nothing's random. There's only various levels of zoom. And one thing that these medicines can show you is they allow you to zoom out and see those kind of patterns to allow things to come together. And this is why we kind of network with other people that are on our same wavelength or same vibration or same path, is that so then we can come together as teams and communities to then manifest something, the quality level of this show, which is like nothing you've ever seen. So yeah, we're both very excited about it. And well said, my good man.
Yeah, and so, www.shamansoftheglobalvillage.com. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us.